every week on the show, we partnered with the Rental Housing Association of Washington to do a segment on housing issues. We've been talking about them a lot with some of the problems with landlords we're facing with a lack of evictions. And we want to keep this conversation going all the way up to the next legislative session because there's been, I think, increasing attention on the ridiculousness of some of the laws around rental housing, around housing affordability. And so we want the conversation to continue up to the legislative session. Now, I'm very concerned about the legislative session, and here's why. Well, for a lot of reasons. If you can imagine, things could get much, much worse in Washington. So in November, depending on the outcome of a few races, Democrats could reach a supermajority in the state Senate. What's the danger of a supermajority? Well, they can continue to make a lot of decisions without any input whatsoever, without having to work with Republicans at all. They can override vetoes. There's a lot of other things they can do. And when you think of some of the bills, even last session, that were defeated on just narrow margins, there won't be anything stopping Democrats in Olympia if they can reach a supermajority, including on some of these insane housing bills, rent control, stuff like that. So we asked Senate Minority Leader, he wishes, Senate maybe one day, Senate Minority Leader John Braun to come on with us today, because this is an issue we haven't talked a lot about. We've been focused on individual races, the governor's race, OSPI, et cetera, but we really need to start talking about, and we're going to spend some time on this next week, the races that we need to focus on to stop a supermajority from happening and what the consequences of that would be. So Senator John Braun was nice enough to join us today to discuss just that. Senator John Braun, welcome to Undivided.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so I'm thinking positive thoughts for November. I got good thoughts about everything, but separate from that, let's just talk about some of the realities that the Senate Republican caucus is facing. So we know the margin is how much right now in the Senate?
So right now there are 49 seats in the Senate. There are 29 Democrats and 20 Republicans.
Okay. So how many more Democratic seats would there have to be for it to be a supermajority? Do the math for me.
So there's two different supermajorities, a 60% supermajority, which is what allow them to do bonding for the capital budget, for the transportation budget. They would only need one more seat. One more seat would be 30, and they would have 60% supermajority. For a constitutional supermajority, it's 2/3. They need 33 seats. They need 4 seats picked up to have where they can put a constitutional amendment on the ballot for the people to vote on.
Gotcha. Okay. Both of those are bad, though, obviously. So for November, is there a realistic possibility that Democrats could reach one of those two for the next session?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, thanks to the redistricting order from Judge Lasnik last spring, they have really put us in a real defend position. We have 4 very tight races to defend, where we hold the seat and we have to defend the seat either with the incumbent or, in a couple cases, the incumbent retired and we're defending with a different candidate. If they pick up any one of those, they have a supermajority they can write bonds. They don't need to include Republicans in the capital budget process or in the transportation budget process. That's absolutely real. And it's not, and they have the ability, to win 4 seats, and then they could put a new constitutional amendments before the people for a vote. Now, I will say, and I don't want to sound too negative, we're not sitting by. We have great candidates in all 4 of those races. They are running spectacular campaigns. They are, raising money. More importantly, they're out there knocking on doors, talking to people. So I feel like these are ours to win, and we're very much focused on going and winning them. But the risks are high for the state of Washington.
Yeah. So, and that gives them, so it's a 2/3 to override a veto, right?
That's right.
Yeah, not that, if there's a Democratic governor, not that I'm worried about a Democratic governor vetoing anything that a Democratic majority does, but let's talk about a few of the policies that were really stopped on a razor thin basis, even last legislative session, because there's a few that worry me if they're able to reach these majorities. And of course, the House is a different beast, but rent control, what's the likelihood they bring that back up this session, especially if they've strengthened their majorities?
Oh, I think the likelihood is 100%. I mean, whatever they have, as long as they have a majority, they're going to bring that forward. Whether we can hold that or not is the question. I mean, and let's be clear, this is a real problem. I mean, we have an issue with rent in our state. Rent control is 100% not the right solution, and virtually every economist in the world would tell you it's a bad solution. But they aren't, for the party that believes in science and data, they don't believe in science and data when it comes to rent control. They want the easy solution that won't work rather than a real solution. They'll create more homes and therefore more homes at affordable prices in our state.
Yeah, and I don't even think, I guess it's not fair maybe for me to characterize it just as a Republican Democrat supermajority issue because they don't need a supermajority to pass these things. That has to do with, well, how bulletproof it might be. But there were two Democrats that helped stop a couple policies, but rent control is one of them. State Senator Mark Mullet, State Senator Kevin Van de Weg, and moderate Democrats, and they're now gone. So who they're replaced with matters, right? How fearful are you about just the absence of those two Democrats who were willing to stop some of these policies?
Well, it's certainly going to have a big impact. Not having Mark Mullet and Kevin Van Wake returning in the 2025 session is a big deal, especially in particular, I'd call out Mark Mullet, who's been a champion for regular people trying to make their way in the state of Washington and for common sense solutions. And we've partnered with them on a lot of in a lot of places to stop bad policy. I think it's going to put pressure on other members of their caucus who maybe understood that it was bad policy, but didn't have weren't willing to be brave and out front like Mark has been. And hopefully they'll step up. We're certainly going to work on wherever we land after the election. Our job is then go to build consensus with like-minded folks, whatever their party, to stop things that will make our state worse. And we'll give it our best try. But frankly, the numbers matter. I mean, if right now we have to find 5 friends on the other side of the aisle if we're going to stop something. If we have to find more than that, the problem just gets harder. I mean, if you want balance in the state of Washington, we need to elect more Republicans and fewer Democrats. And whether that means a change in majority or just closer balance, either one I think is better for the state of Washington.
Yeah, so I also want to talk about the efforts to ban natural gas. So when that bill came forth this past legislative session, it was a ban. It banned, new residential hookups. It ended PSE's obligation to serve existing customers. So they watered it down to get some semblance of it passed. It happened at like 2 a.m. So this thing squeaked through by narrow margins. It was a watered down version of what they wanted. So if the initiative to protect natural gas is not successful, do you see them revisiting a more stringent natural gas ban?
I think that they're going to have some special interests that continue to push for that. For reasons I don't really understand, there's this growing push against natural gas. I mean, I think it's because it's very clean and it's relatively inexpensive compared to some of the other options out there, like wind or solar, and it's very effective in our state. Unlike solar, as an example, they see it as a threat and therefore they're opposed. I think that this whole process of the initiative, or the bill, and then the initiative subsequently have put a lot of attention on this issue. I'd like to think some of our Democratic friends are paying attention and getting feedback from their constituents. So let's be clear, that initiative is popular across party lines. This is not a partisan issue. People understand that gas is an efficient way to heat here in our state. It's clean, and they don't want it taken away. And so I don't think they'll come back with a full-on effort, that has got support to make it worse. But will they stick with what actually passed in last session? I think it'll be hard to undo that without the initiative. And the initiative doesn't undo all of it, but it makes it a lot better. And so we'll see. Now, just to be clear, I think this initiative passes easily. I think that this is broadly popular and it's going to pass, and that will be a clear signal to the Democratic majorities that they got this one wrong, because I think they did.
Yeah, and I agree on its face. Like, if everyone's operating in good faith and the campaigns are honest, 100%, I think the initiative to protect natural gas I mean, look who signed it. Overwhelmingly, they collected 500,000 signatures in like a month and a half. Democrats, independents, Republicans. But these campaigns against the initiatives have been anything but honest. And I got to say, I kind of... you were hoping that maybe they've at least been kind of woken up to, hey, this isn't popular banning natural gas. I just feel the opposite. I think that if voters don't pass the initiative, they're going to feel so emboldened to kind of move forth with their policy agenda. I don't see them like taking a second to really consider what constituents have told them.
Yeah, I understand how you get to that conclusion. And this business, you got to keep, and certainly in Washington, as a Republican, you have to maintain a certain sense of hope, no matter what, or you can't wake up every day and go do it.
Sure.
But I think, I just think, given, and you mentioned it, the speed and the eagerness of people across party lines to sign this initiative tells me that this is something that regular people really understand. They can understand it in their lives and how it's going to affect them. And I really believe it's going to pass. But if it doesn't, I mean, there's a lot at stake, as we talked about, whether it's potential supermajorities in the legislature, or the Democrats feeling they got a free hand because they wildly overspent the yes campaign and somehow squeaked out a victory in the initiatives and defeated them. They think they're emboldened to do more. I do worry about that.
Yeah.
I guess for now, at least for the next 40 days, we're going to focus on making sure that doesn't happen and trying to do the right thing for the state of Washington.
Yeah, I mean, it would increase rents, it would increase home prices, it would put people out of business. We've had a restaurant owner in here, a Japanese immigrant, who says he would have to end his business. It just would not be feasible anymore. So just a couple things just to see if I'm forgetting, because I want people to understand what's at stake and what could happen this next session if November doesn't go well. So the proposals that come to mind for me that were narrowly defeated: pay for striking workers is absolutely one of them. Are there any other on the fence things that you think will be quickly revisited?
I think you talk about rent control,
Rent control.
unemployment for striking workers.
Yep.
Absolutely. A couple tax initiatives, the current prohibition or limit on growth and property tax at 1%, 100% going to come back and work on that. The real estate excise tax increase is going to come back. I mean, there's a whole probably a dozen public safety bills that we were able to kill in the Senate this last session that would have made, easier on convicted criminals and harder on law-abiding citizens. Those are going to be back. These are all things we're going to continue to face if the public doesn't stand up and say, no, we demand more balance, more reasonable output from Olympia in the future, and elect a better balance of Democrats and Republicans.
Senator John Braun, you got a difficult job, man, but we appreciate you taking time to give us the rundown.
Well, thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure to be here.
All right, and that segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends at the Rental Housing Association of Washington. They also have been fighting to try to make sure some of these insane housing policies don't make it across the finish line, and that is going to depend on what the division of power is in Olympia after this election. And so next week, we're going to be talking about some key races where, frankly, I don't care who the Republican is, that we need it to stay red, because if it doesn't, you're getting to supermajority territory, and that would be an absolute disaster. We absolutely cannot allow it.